Allie, about 2 hours to go now. We know Massey is a no for Johnson. Who else are you watching?
There's a lot of names we're watching, though all of them are sort of leaving the door open, hanging out on the fence, however you want to say it. They are not hard-nosed, and that's really important when you think about the stakes here for Mike Johnson, because you're right, Anna, to point out that there's no margin for error because he has already lost the one vote that he can afford to lose. I'll put up for you on the screen, though, a list of some other names that we are looking at closely. The thing that most of these people have in common is they are on the more ultra-conservative side of this Republican conference spectrum. For instance, I'm looking at someone like Congressman Chip Roy, who I spoke to this morning. He's sort of at the center of this hubbub and these negotiations because there are some members who seem to say that if he were to be put in charge of the powerful Rules Committee, that they would seemingly get in line behind Johnson. That could present some problems, though, because Roy has shown a willingness to buck leadership, and putting him in charge of the Rules Committee would basically give him a say over what gets to the floor and what doesn't in terms of legislation. I actually caught up with Chip Roy just in the last half hour or so, and I asked him, is it enough if you become chair of the Rules Committee? Would that get you behind Johnson? He merely told me that's not what this is about for him. For him, it's more about procedure and sort of breaking apart the idea of multiple bills being voted on together, sort of slowing down the congressional procedure here in Congress. But again, you see Mike Johnson there saying he's not going to be negotiating, seemingly learning the lessons of Kevin McCarthy, who sort of negotiated away the gig before he even had it. And now that leaves us to what these members will do when they actually vote. For his part, the president-elect, Donald Trump, who is often at the center of these dealings for the House Republican Conference, has merely wished Johnson good luck today. We'll see where that gets him.
Allie, we heard Johnson say he's not going to be making deals with anybody. So what is he doing to try to win over the holdouts?
Still having conversations, though. I don't know where the line is between a conversation, a negotiation, and making a deal, but wherever that line is kind of where Johnson finds himself at this point. He is doing it on his own, though, because listen to what he said when he was asked recently if he's got Trump making calls for him. Watch.
Are you asking Trump to call people on your behalf?
No, I haven't. No, I met with him yesterday at Mar-a-Lago. We had a great visit. But I think that I think this is going to turn out well tomorrow, and we'll stay unified, and we'll get all this done.
We'll see if that's actually the prediction for today, now that we are a few hours out from the vote. And Johnson has Trump's backing, but will it sway any of these members who, in the past, though they have been Trump backers in some cases themselves, really do march to the beat of their own drum here in Congress?
And Michael, I know you've also been tracking what some of these hardline Republicans want in exchange for their votes. Walk us through that.
Yeah, as Allie mentioned, what we seem to be emerging as one of the biggest asks in really these final hours before the speaker race. Remember, it gavels in at noon. That's when the action begins. Is this demand that Chip Roy be made chairman of the House Rules Committee? Now, I had some reporting on this yesterday, and I heard from sources that Chip Roy himself wasn't asking for this. And I just spoke to Congressman Tim Burchett. He's one of those undecided lawmakers. He said he spoke to Chip Roy just last night, and Chip Roy told him that this is not personally a demand that he is making. But these Freedom Caucus members, these hardline conservatives in the House, they appear to be demanding that Johnson do this in exchange for their support. As Allie mentioned, that would be a very significant move, though there are a lot of doubts and questions about whether Roy would actually get it because his history of bucking House Republican leadership, and also the revolt it could lead to among moderate Republicans. Moderates, people who are more to the left in the conference, are not going to be thrilled about the idea of ceding control of the Rules Committee to Chip Roy. So that's one of these predicaments that Johnson finds himself in as he's weighing the two different sides. No other from the Rules Committee, there was reporting yesterday that some of these holdouts are asking Johnson to make commitments on a host of different ideas, including spending cuts and opening up the process for negotiating big ticket legislation. Instead of having staffers and top lawmakers negotiate some of these high stakes pieces of legislation, they want it to be opened up to more rank and file members. It's a constant call and request that we've heard from lawmakers throughout the last Congress. What the commitment actually looks like, though, that would get the lawmakers on board, that remains to be seen. And of course, as Allie mentioned, Johnson being very clear he does not plan to cut any deals with lawmakers.
And also expressing confidence this morning. Congressman Curbelo, do you think realistically Johnson can get all these votes minus the one by Thomas Massie without making a deal or two?
And I think he can, and it's pretty clear that he has learned from the Kevin McCarthy experience. We watched over the course of that week while Kevin McCarthy was trying to become Speaker how he negotiated over and over again. And what did that get him? Well, it got him ousted just some 8 months later. So Mike Johnson understands that this group of members that we're talking about that you all just put up on screen, they will always make demands that are unreasonable. They do not want any kind of compromise with Democrats, yet there aren't sufficient votes in the House for the policies that they embrace. And of course, yes, a lot of Republicans towards the center of the conference, more towards the swing side of the conference, they resent these kinds of members and they don't want to see them in power. So I highly doubt that Speaker Johnson would put someone like Chip Roy to head the Rules Committee. Without control of the Rules Committee, the Speaker cannot control the floor of the House. So I think Mike Johnson is playing the hand he's been dealt, and he's playing it as best he can at this point.
Is there anyone specific you have your eye on this morning?
Look, I think any of those members might force a second vote, try to embarrass Johnson, try to bring him to the table, try to extract some concessions. But I think outside of just saying that he's going to try to open up the process and be more inclusive of the membership, I don't think he's going to give them anything else because really there's nothing else to give. And I think one of the changes he's made that shows kind of where he is pushing the threshold to 9 members for the motion to vacate the chair to prevent what we saw in this past Congress where Matt Gaetz, one single member, completely destabilized the House. So I really think Mike Johnson is taking the right approach to this, and I think he's ultimately going to be successful, even if it takes 2 or 3 rounds.
I imagine Mike Johnson's happy Matt Gaetz isn't there today or is no longer going to be in the Congress. Congressman Crowley, Democrats are looking to present a united front this morning. What are you hearing about their strategy?
Well, I think Hakeem Jeffries has done a great job in keeping Democrats together. I think that's the plan going forward. It really shows a stark difference between how Democrats are handling themselves and how dysfunctional the Republicans have been in terms of their conference. I think when you look back on the last Congress, probably one of the most dysfunctional Congresses in the history of Congress, and yet, the Freedom Caucus folks, they primarily got reelected. So they think what they have done so far has been pretty good because the constituents keep getting them reelected. But in the end, Anna, I really don't see where they go. Mike Johnson is a real conservative. There's really no alternative. He has a very clean record and background. There's no issues there at all. And he has the support of Trump. So I do think at the end of the day, he's really dealing a deck of cards that are so much stronger than what Kevin McCarthy had last time. And I think the panelists are right. I don't think that he's going to be negotiating. And if he is, it's going to have to take multiple rounds, I think.
Allie, nothing's for certain. If not Johnson, is there an alternative?
This is the game that sort of brings me back to a year ago when the Republicans were left without a speaker after ousting McCarthy. It's hard to replace someone with no one. They managed to do it after weeks of chaos with Johnson. But the 2 names that you hear often, and none of these are being entertained in any sort of official capacity because it really is Johnson or no one at this point. But the other 2 names that you could see step into the fold here are the number 2, Steve Scalise, or the head of the Judiciary Committee, Jim Jordan. Both of these men have deep member relationships. They have taken a lot of steps in the political off season, getting out on the campaign trail, giving money to members who are in tough races. That's the kind of political currency that jobs and leadership trade on. And certainly both of those men have put in the work in those spaces. But each of them probably carries a whip count of detractors at about 12 to 20 people. And we've actually seen those whip counts come into play before because both Scalise and Jordan tried their hand at becoming Speaker after McCarthy and wildly failed after, 1 round or multiple rounds in Jim Jordan's case. And so you have these names that are out there, but not necessarily in a truly viable fashion. I do think, Anna, that the way this could ultimately play out for the members that are skeptical on the screen, there's also a question of maybe one of them votes present, maybe one takes a walk and isn't on the floor and just finds themselves not part of the vote count. That would end up changing the magic number. It would mean Johnson's no longer looking at 218, maybe he looks at 217, 216. Gotcha. Can't go below 215 because of Democrats, but that's the numbers game.
Yeah, no, good to just kind of walk us all through and set our expectations accordingly and how this could go about, because there are a number of different scenarios. We do know, Michael, that it took Kevin McCarthy 2 years ago 15 ballots to ultimately win the speakership. That was over the course of 4 days. So if this doesn't end today, we know Monday is when the election certification is supposed to happen. So what happens then if there's no speaker?
Well, theoretically, Anna, if there's no speaker, you can't do anything in the House. Members are not sworn in, so they can't vote on certifying the election. And that is a main argument that we're hearing from a lot of Speaker Johnson's allies, folks who say we don't want this chaos right now. We don't want a protracted speaker's race. Instead, let's rally around Johnson so we could be able to certify the election on time on Monday. It's going to be a real question of if that argument is viable and strong enough today and through the weekend to see if we have a speaker.
Congressman Curbelo, I can't imagine President-elect Trump would be happy if his win isn't certified in time. Here he was earlier this week.
I think they'll support Speaker Johnson. He's the one that can win right now. People like him. Almost everybody likes him. Others are very good, too, but they have 30 or 40 people that don't like him. So that's pretty tough.
Congressman Curbelo, do you expect Donald Trump to get more involved here? And is there a risk if he does?
I don't think so, Anna. I think Donald Trump has been pretty clear that while he supports Mike Johnson, he is going to require Mike Johnson to stand on his own 2 feet and to garner the support he needs inside the conference. So it's up to Mike Johnson to close this deal today.